I work from home, so what was I doing at 9 a.m. this morning? Was in the cinema watching No Way Home, because I can earn money whenever I want. Tricky time of year though, so if you're trying to make that tough decision between should I buy presents for my loved ones or should I go to the cinema every day for the next 6 weeks to watch Spider-Man? I mean, for me, I live near a cinema, it's like £6 a pop, but if you live near an Odeon in London, that's a proper decision that you have to make there. That's a tough, real-life choice. So I thought I'd share my thoughts with all of you, all three of you, to help you decide. And I've borrowed Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan's rating scale from their podcast, The Friendship Onion, because I need some parameters, especially because I don't want to spoil anything. So I thought this might help me keep things in a bit of a box. Now, they usually use their scale to rate food from around the world. Not quite the same thing, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So first up, we have flavour. No Way Home tastes like sadness. I cried 3 times. It would have been 2. I had a little bit of a pause between the last 2 jags. If I'd had less self-restraint, I really could have just let them run into one, but then I would have been quite upset for probably like the last 40 minutes of the film. One thing I do appreciate is that those end credit scenes mean that you actually have time to compose yourself after something has ended, whereas the last film that I saw at the cinema that made me cry at the end, the lights come up immediately and you're just like, okay, well now I'm a mess, thank you, and now I shall leave. I don't know if it's helpful to have a point of comparison of which films make me cry, because really most of them do. I saw Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in the cinema. Many years ago, and I cried when Uncle Ben died. Having said that, it also tastes a bit like a picnic on a summer's day with friends. So I guess like cocktail sausages and £4 rosé if you're in England. And the reason I say that is because I don't think this is a spoiler particularly because it's so strongly suggested in the trailer, but Ned and MJ and Peter do form a little bit of a Scooby-Doo trio. Scooby-Doo weren't a trio really, were they? You know what, the dynamic, it's more like Buffy, Xander and Willow, except that all of them are very intelligent enough to go to MIT. So that was good. That's not actually where most of the laughs are, but I can't say where most of the laughs are. And it also tastes like, on the flip side of that, tastes quite metallic. Peter Parker does get quite badly beaten up. I don't know why people think that Tom Holland's Spider-Man doesn't have any physical consequences. He got hit by a train last time, and he has some pretty serious fights in this one. I really appreciate that Spider-Man only flies when he's shooting webs. Like mid-air fights just don't, the stakes aren't the same because you can't feel the impact when people are sort of flying around in the air, hitting people in midair. So I really appreciate that his fight scenes are, you know, with his feet sort of on the ground for the impact. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a fight scene where they're going through walls and floors and that sort of thing, and I very much felt that. That tasted like hurt. I don't think it would be a Marvel film without having, and it sort of wouldn't be true to the character either, without having at least a tinge of hope at the end. So it also tastes like hope, whatever that tastes like. So for flavour, I'm going to go one better on Spinal Tap and score it 12 out of 10. Next up is aesthetics. It looks pretty good. Lots of pretty colours, most of them red, lots of red. If you liked the Mysterio mindfrack scene from Far From Home, there's a substantial sequence in this one, which is also quite mind-bending. I guess if we're talking about aesthetics or looks, we can also roll into this. Things do not always look as they appear. So I was definitely surprised by a good bunch of the story, considering I've been quite deep into fan theories and recognise lots of moments as they happen from the trailer, but was definitely surprised about how certain sequences came to an end, and just surprised by some of the locations. There's definitely a very aesthetic scene near the start of the film, depending on which way inclined you are. Having said that, I think it's clear that the actors are getting older and that they're maybe ready to play slightly older incarnations of their characters. That doesn't really tell you anything about how the film ends, so don't worry. So for aesthetics, I'm going to score it, this will come as a shock to you, but I'm also going to give that a 12 out of 10. Next we have utility. I think it's a pretty useful film. As mentioned, you could use it if you want to cry, you know, get deep with your feelings. You can use it for a laugh. Not really the places that I expected, or maybe not from the characters necessarily that I expected, like the characters that I thought were going to have the most comedic value. It was actually a different group of characters and their dynamic that I thought was funniest. I also think this is a really useful film if you are interested in storytelling on any level, and that includes lots of people, so not just writers, but also if you make music or YouTube videos or podcasts. Any of that stuff is all storytelling. I'm probably not applying any of it right now. And so just those surprises and also the tonal shifts. So after the first very sad thing happens, they manage to kind of move away from that and add some levity without losing the significance of what's happened so far. It was quite toasty in the cinema, and it's a tough time of year depending on where you are in the climate. So you could use it as a winter warmer. Christmas time can also be quite toxic for some people to see their family. So if you need to use it to get away from family, that's 3 hours of your life that you can just sit in the dark by yourself or with someone that you'd prefer to sit with. If you really like your family, by the same token, you could use this film to spend time with them and not talk to each other. Or I should probably mention the reactions of people in the cinema, because it's very rare that I'm in a cinema where there are any reactions, because we're just a very reserved nation. So there were 2 moments where everyone gasped, and on the second one of those, someone applauded. And that might sound very underwhelming, but I have only once in my life been in a cinema where there was any reaction besides laughter, and that was when Legolas did the Oliphant thing in Return of the King. That whole thing, the cinema applauded. In the US is a completely different story. I have been in screenings in the US, and we won't talk about audience reactions there because it's a very different experience to watching a film in the UK. And I didn't see Infinity War or Endgame at the cinema, unfortunately, in which case I think I probably would have. It would be a more common thing to have other things going on around you during a Marvel film. Is there anything else that you could use it for besides just entertainment value? I mean, what more do you need, really? As ever, the story that they've gone with is a really nice metaphor for that time of life and the choices that you make. So I'm probably going to carry on thinking about that for a bit. So if you're at that age, you could use it in that way too, to also think about the next stage of life. And there's lots there, not a spoiler because it's in the trailer, but there's lots there surrounding, you know, the idea of forgetting and memories and the significance of that. Very important when you've got close family and friends, or when you're trying to reinvent yourself at sort of college age, or any age, I guess. So for utility, I'm a bit like Spider-Man. I've got heightened sense of taste, smell, touch, attention to detail, all that sort of thing. None of the athleticism. Utility isn't one of the 5 or 6 senses, but I'm just going to pretend it is and also score that 13 out of 10. Let's just go wild, because, multiplication in No Way Home is also a theme. How does that end song go? I hope I didn't spoil anything, and that if you can, that you do get to see it. I did some reactions to Far From Home where I was joking about the fact that I'd seen so much of Far From Home in little clips online before I watched the actual film that I wondered if there was anything left of the film to watch. For No Way Home, someone kind of made the same point, which is that although they've tried to keep a lot of it secret, the trailers are quite long. There's quite a lot in the trailers. I will say though that the energy of watching something in a cinema, especially when I haven't really been to the cinema much in the last few years because of that thing that keeps going around, is so different. So watching the first scene from the film online, it just doesn't feel the same. Like watching that in the cinema is electric, and it did feel like an event watching it. So if it's within your means, I do hope you get a chance to see it at least once in the cinema. And I do want to share my favourite line, but obviously my favourite line is a spoiler, so all 3 of you stop watching now if you don't want any lines of dialogue spoiled. But my favourite line, I think, was something like, "Is this happening or am I dying?" I guess you had to be the